They rejected me because I'm black. Those 6 trembling words, spoken by a boy clutching a broken violin outside a prestigious academy, stopped a stranger in his tracks. What Jaden didn't know was that the man listening, silent, hidden behind a winter scarf and a calm gaze, was a billionaire with a past that sounded far too much like his own. And in that single moment, on a freezing Chicago sidewalk, one boy's heartbreak would ignite a chain of events powerful enough to challenge an entire institution and rewrite his future. The wind coming off Lake Michigan had a way of cutting through even the thickest winter coat, but Jaden Cole barely felt it. His fingers were numb from more than cold as he stepped out of the tall iron gates of Northbridge Arts Academy, clutching his violin against his chest like it might fall apart if he loosened his grip. One of the strings had snapped during his audition, not because he'd played poorly, but because the violin itself was old, worn, the wood thinned by years of being passed from student to student at a community center that barely kept its lights on. It didn't matter. They didn't even let him finish the piece. The sidewalk outside the academy shimmered with thin sheets of ice, reflecting the blue neon glow from a nearby bus stop sign. The elegant brick building behind him looked peaceful, dignified, everything he wasn't allowed to be. As he walked toward the curb, the heavy doors closed behind him with a deep, echoing thud, like the sound of a verdict being delivered. Jaden's breath quivered in the air. He didn't mean to say anything out loud. Not really. But the words slipped from him, raw and shaking, as if the cold had squeezed them out. They rejected me because I'm black. He said it to no one, to the empty street, to the wind that felt colder now than it had a minute earlier. A bus rumbled in the distance, headlights glaring through the winter haze. Jaden stared straight ahead, trying to blink back the sting that gathered at the corners of his eyes. He wasn't going to cry. Not out here, not where anyone could see. But someone had heard him. A few feet to his left, a man paused mid-step. Jaden hadn't noticed him before. People like that were usually invisible to him. Or maybe he'd trained himself not to make eye contact with strangers in expensive coats. The man looked ordinary enough. Gray wool jacket, dark scarf, leather gloves. A businessman heading home late, probably. But there was something about the way he stood now, frozen, eyes narrowing just slightly as Jaden's words reached him. Elliot Mercer didn't say a thing. He simply watched. Jaden felt the weight of that gaze, though he didn't recognize it as concern. To him, it was just another pair of eyes, and he was tired of being seen only when he failed. He pulled his hood tighter over his head and stepped closer to the edge of the curb, trying to disappear into the swirl of exhaust and streetlights. The memory of the audition room replayed in his mind, how the judges never looked up, how the woman at the back whispered something to another parent, how he felt the moment the room decided he didn't belong. He heard again the rehearsed lines they gave him. "We appreciate your time. We'll keep your file on record. You're very brave for coming." All the soft, polished ways they avoided telling him the truth. He let out a shaky breath. His violin case felt heavier now, banging lightly against his leg with every movement. It wasn't just an instrument. It was the last gift from his father before the world took him too soon. Jaden carried it everywhere, not because it made him look like a musician, but because it made him feel like he still had a chance at something. Jaden looked down at the cracked sidewalk, the icy stains, the tire marks. He felt small against the vastness of the city, like noise swallowed by more noise. People rushed past him, coats pulled high, hats pulled low, not one of them noticing the boy whose dreams had just been dismissed in under 5 minutes. A gust of wind blew harder, lifting the corner of his hood. He swallowed, voice barely audible as he whispered to himself, "I knew they wouldn't take me." The man in the gray coat shifted his weight, his expression unreadable. His breath showed in slow, steady clouds, too steady for someone simply waiting for a bus. His gaze held a strange mix of recognition and something else, something like anger, but not directed at the boy. Jaden stole a glance in his direction and quickly looked away. He didn't know this man. He didn't know that Elliot had once been a kid standing outside a different school, hearing different excuses that all meant the same thing. He didn't know that Elliot's entire empire had been built on vows he made to himself in moments just like this. Jaden only knew the cold. He stepped back as a bus hissed to a stop, brakes squealing on the frozen asphalt. Passengers shuffled on board. Jaden didn't move. He had no energy to get home yet, not with the weight of the rejection still pushing down on his chest. The bus pulled away, leaving a cloud of steam behind. Jaden exhaled slowly, forcing the burn in his throat down. From behind him came the soft crunch of footsteps on ice. He didn't turn, but he felt it. Someone approaching. Someone who had heard his pain. Someone who wasn't walking away. And for the first time that night, Jaden wondered not why someone was watching him, but what they wanted from him. The man's footsteps approached, slow but purposeful, the kind of stride belonging to someone who wasn't afraid of the cold, or the dark, or the way the city swallowed sound after nightfall. Jaden stiffened. Growing up on the South Side had taught him plenty. Don't linger near strangers. Don't show fear. Don't let anyone think you're lost. He tightened his grip on the violin case, pretending he didn't notice the shadow moving closer. "You all right, son?" The voice was deep but gentle, carrying warmth that didn't match the icy air. Jaden turned slightly, enough to be polite but not enough to engage. "I'm fine," he murmured. The lie came out thin and brittle. "Just waiting." "For the bus?" the man asked. Jaden shrugged. "For something." He wasn't sure honesty mattered. Nothing he said seemed to matter to anyone these days. The man didn't press. He just nodded like he understood more than he should. His gaze drifted toward the tall academy building behind them, its windows glowing with warm light. The kind that only came from money. Old money. Polished money. Inside, parents were probably celebrating with their kids. Jackets draped over chairs. Hot chocolate steaming in paper cups. Voices rising with pride. Out here, the cold felt sharper. The man followed Jaden's earlier glance toward the school gates. "They rejected you?" Jaden swallowed. His voice cracked as he whispered, "They didn't even give me a chance." A gust of wind cut through the street, whipping dead leaves around their feet. Jaden blinked against the cold and the memory that clawed back up his throat. He hadn't wanted to relive it, but the man's question opened the door. His mind slipped back to 3 hours earlier. The academy's lobby had gleamed like a museum. Marble tiles, gold railings, students in tailored uniforms drifting up wide staircases. Jaden had stood among them with his frayed backpack, the zipper broken on one corner, his violin case patched with tape. He'd tried his best to make himself smaller, invisible, the way he always did when he felt out of place. A receptionist barely glanced at him before saying, "Audition's downstairs. Please wait until you're called." He waited almost an hour. No one spoke to him. Parents whispered behind manicured hands. When they finally called his name, he walked into a room of strangers who evaluated him the way people examine spoiled produce in a grocery store. Quickly, with little interest, with an unspoken assumption that something was wrong. Jaden remembered raising the violin, trying to steady his breath. He'd practiced for weeks. He'd skipped lunch to squeeze in extra hours at the community center before they closed. He wanted this so badly that his chest ached every time he imagined himself walking through those academy doors as a real student. But the room didn't want him. He played 8 bars, just 8. The panelist in the middle tapped her pen twice and said, "Thank you, Jaden. We've heard enough." A parent had been lingering near the doorway. She leaned toward another, whispering, "They're letting anyone try now. This is ridiculous." Anyone. Ridiculous. Those words burned hotter than anything else. Outside, Jaden had forced himself not to cry as he passed the front gates, but his throat felt like it was closing. He came back to the present, blinking hard. I shouldn't have tried, he muttered to the man at the bus stop. Everybody could see I didn't belong. The man watched him quietly. His expression wasn't pity. Pity had a softness to it. This was sharper, like someone was taking notes on the world's wrongs. What makes you think that? He asked. Jaden gave a hollow laugh. The way they looked at me. He didn't expect the man to respond. Most adults either dismissed him or offered empty comfort, but this man's voice held a steady gravity when he said, "People who don't look you in the eye are usually hiding from something." Jaden frowned. Like what? The truth. The words hit harder than he expected. Jaden lowered his gaze, unable to hold the man's eyes. His fingers brushed the cracked wood of the violin case. My dad told me once that music was my way out, he whispered. But maybe he was wrong. Another bus groaned past without stopping. The street felt too quiet now, too wide, like the city was waiting to see what he'd say next. You're young, the man replied softly. But you'll learn this soon enough. The world loves to shut doors on people who remind it of its failures. Jaden didn't fully understand, but some part of him absorbed it, tucked it away like a note written in a language he hoped to learn someday. The man stepped closer, not too close, just close enough for Jaden to see the lines around his eyes. They weren't the lines of someone who laughed often. They were the lines of someone who had lived hard, had been denied things he deserved, had carried shame that wasn't his. Jaden looked away again. Come on, the man said softly. Tell me what happened. Jaden hesitated. All his life, adults told him to be careful about trusting strangers. But tonight wasn't like other nights. He was tired of pretending, tired of holding in everything until it bruised his ribs. Maybe telling someone didn't matter. Maybe nothing mattered. So he told him. He told him about the rushed audition, the dismissive looks, the whispered comment that cracked something deep inside him. He told him how the panel thanked him with the same tone people used for charity cases. He told him everything he hadn't even told his mother. When he finished, the man stood silent for a long moment. Jaden wished he hadn't said so much, but then the man spoke, calm and deliberate. I've seen doors close for reasons just like that, he said. Doors that should have opened. Doors that could have changed a kid's life. The city hummed around them, distant sirens, the whir of a passing train, a dog barking somewhere down the block. Yet somehow the street felt still. What's your name, son? The man finally asked. Jaden, he whispered. Jaden Cole. I'm Elliot, the man replied, and I think I understand more than you realize. Jaden didn't know what to say. He nodded weakly. Elliot looked back at the academy's imposing gates, the stone pillars standing tall like they guarded something sacred. Tomorrow, he said quietly, you'll go back inside that gate in your mind. Over and over. Kids do that. So do adults. But don't let that be the place where your story stops. Jaden blinked. I don't have anywhere else to go. Elliot's eyes softened. Maybe you do. You just don't know it yet. A thin silence stretched between them, carrying something unspoken, something that felt like the beginning of a shift in the air. The bus finally turned the corner, approaching slowly. Jaden took one last glance at Elliot, confused by this oddly calm, strangely intense man who didn't walk away like everyone else. But before he could say anything, Elliot murmured, We'll talk again, Jaden. The doors of the bus hissed open. Jaden stepped on, the warmth fogging his glasses as he moved to an empty seat near the back. As the bus pulled away, he glanced out the window. Elliot Mercer stood alone under the streetlight, hands in his pockets, watching the bus fade into the snowy dark like he wasn't done with this night, or with Jaden. And for the first time since leaving those academy doors, Jaden felt something unfamiliar flicker in his chest. Not hope. Not yet. Just a question. Why him? And why now? The questions clung to Jaden long after he stepped off the bus and trudged the 3 blocks toward his apartment complex. A faded brick building squeezed between a boarded-up laundromat and a liquor store whose neon sign buzzed through the night. The air smelled of diesel and old snow, but Jaden barely noticed. His mind looped through the evening like a stuck record. His failed audition, the bitter cold, that stranger's voice cutting through the wind with quiet certainty. Elliot. A name too gentle for a man whose gaze felt like it could slice steel. Jaden kept replaying the moment he'd spoken aloud at the academy gates, embarrassed that a stranger had heard him. It had been an unguarded truth, one he never meant to share. People didn't need to know his business. Most didn't care. Most didn't ask. But Elliot had asked. Back in his room, Jaden set his cracked violin case gently on the bed, brushing away a speck of dirt from the latch. He didn't open it. He couldn't. Not tonight. He sat down beside it instead, running a hand over the case as though it were fragile skin. His father's handwriting was still etched on the inside panel, a tiny note only Jaden knew existed. Play with your heart, son. It had kept him going all these years, but tonight those words felt more like a goodbye than a promise. He exhaled and leaned back on his pillow, letting the exhaustion swallow him whole. The next afternoon, the winter sun hung low over the south side, casting long, tired shadows through the cracked pavement of the bus stop on 63rd Street. Kids chased each other across the sidewalk, their laughter echoing against graffiti-stained walls. A street vendor packed up his cart, the smell of roasted peanuts fading into the wind. It was one of those afternoons when everything felt slow, like the city was catching its breath. Jaden had just come from the corner market, carrying a small bag of groceries for his mother's early shift at the clinic. He walked carefully, avoiding patches of ice hidden under puddles. He wasn't thinking about the academy anymore, or at least he tried not to. But the questions still gnawed at him, no matter how much he tried to shove them down. When he reached the bus stop, he heard a sharp gasp behind him. An older Hispanic woman, tiny, bundled in a worn tan coat, had been wrestling with 2 grocery bags when one ripped straight down the middle. Apples rolled across the sidewalk like marbles. A carton of eggs slipped out and nearly cracked. A jar of salsa teetered on the edge of the curb. People glanced over but kept walking, tucking their chins deeper into their scarves, eyes fixed on anywhere but her. It was Chicago after all. Help wasn't something you expected. Except from Jaden. Without thinking, he set his own bag down and dropped to his knees, scooping apples out of slush and catching the jar before it shattered. "Don't worry, ma'am," he said gently. "I got you." The woman's hands trembled as she held the torn bag. "Thank you, mijo. I didn't mean to." "It's all right," Jaden said, smiling softly. He gathered the groceries, wiped off the fruit on his sleeve, and found a spare plastic bag in his pocket. The one he always carried in case the violin case needed covering in rain or snow. He transferred her items carefully, knotting the handles twice so they wouldn't break. She blinked at him, surprised by the care. "You're very kind." Jaden shrugged, cheeks warming. Everybody needs help sometimes. It was the kind of act he didn't think about. The kind he'd watched his mother do every day, on buses, in clinics, in grocery lines. Quiet kindness that expected nothing in return. He handed the woman her bag with both hands. She smiled, lines crinkling at the corners of her eyes. "God bless you," she whispered. Jaden returned the smile, small but sincere. "Have a safe night, ma'am." He didn't know someone was watching. Across the street, standing near a lamppost dressed in peeling yellow paint, was Elliot Mercer. Not in a suit today, not looking like a businessman at all. He wore a dark beanie, plain gloves, and a heavy coat zipped up to his throat. He stood still, hands tucked in his pockets, eyes fixed on Jaden with a strange, quiet intensity. Jaden didn't see him, not yet. He was too busy collecting an apple that had rolled into the snowbank. He brushed it clean, placed it back in the woman's bag, and nodded goodbye before turning toward the bus bench. Elliot watched the entire scene unfold like a memory he couldn't let go of. The way the boy didn't hesitate. The way he smiled despite everything weighing on him. The way he helped a stranger with the same tenderness most kids reserved for loved ones. It was the kind of kindness that didn't scream. It didn't advertise itself. It just was. And it stirred something deep in Elliot's chest. Something old, long buried beneath years of boardrooms, speeches, endless responsibilities, and the cold armor of success. Something he wasn't sure he remembered how to feel. He took a step forward. Jaden looked up just as Elliot crossed the street, confusion flickering across his face. He hadn't expected to see him again. Not here, not now, not anywhere. His pulse jumped in his throat. Elliot offered a small nod, one that held more meaning than words. "You're a good kid," he said simply. Jaden blinked. "I just helped her, that's all." "That's not all," Elliot replied. His tone wasn't soft, but it wasn't hard either. It was true. Most people walked past. Jaden shifted uncomfortably. Compliments always made him uneasy. She needed help. Elliot studied him with an expression Jaden couldn't decipher. Not everyone does what's needed. A bus pulled up then, its brakes screeching, interrupting the moment. Jaden glanced at it, then back at Elliot, not sure whether to stay or leave. The doors opened, and warm air spilled out. He was about to climb aboard when Elliot said, "Jaden." The boy paused. "I'll see you again," Elliot said quietly, like it wasn't a question, but a promise. The bus doors hissed closed behind Jaden as he stepped in, and again he found himself staring out at Elliot from a fogged-up window. The man didn't move until the bus rolled away, swallowed by the winter dusk. Jaden felt something shift inside his chest, something small but unmistakable. The world had seen him fail yesterday. Tonight, someone had seen him do good. He didn't know which moment mattered more. He only knew one thing for certain. Whoever Elliot was, he wasn't done with Jaden Cole. Not even close. Jaden felt those words echo in his chest as the bus rattled deeper into the south side, passing shuttered corner stores and snow-dusted rooftops. The fluorescent lights inside the bus flickered with every bump in the road, casting soft shadows that swayed across Jaden's face. He sat quietly, one hand resting protectively on the violin case leaning against his leg. It was a long ride home, but tonight it felt even longer, as if the weight of the previous day was stretching time itself. He leaned his head against the cold window. The city blurred outside. Street lamps, brick buildings, power lines, images sliding past without meaning. Everything felt suspended. Jaden kept replaying the moment Elliot approached him at the bus stop, the way the man acknowledged his small act of kindness like it mattered, like he mattered. People didn't usually see Jaden like that. Most didn't look long enough to notice anything beyond his hoodie, his worn shoes, his zippered backpack. He'd learned early that being invisible was safer than being misunderstood. But Elliot had seen him. He wasn't sure whether that made him feel warm or terrified. The next day, the sun barely made it through the clouds as Jaden hurried across the slushy pavement toward the old brick building that housed the neighborhood community center. He came often, not because it was fancy or well-equipped, but because it had one working piano, a few battered music stands, and a dusty practice room nobody used after 5 p.m. That meant he could be alone with his music, alone with the one thing that never judged him. He pulled open the heavy metal door, its rusty hinge shrieking in protest. Inside, the lighting was dim, the color of weak tea, and the air smelled faintly of old books and disinfectant. Kids were finishing an after-school program, backpacks bouncing against their backs as they raced out the door. A volunteer swept confetti from a craft project into a dustpan. "Hey, Jay," called Mr. Thompson, the center's caretaker, from behind the front desk. "You here to practice again?" Jaden nodded. "Just for a bit. You know where the key is?" Jaden reached under the desk drawer where the spare key always sat in a chipped ceramic bowl shaped like a sunflower. He grabbed it, gave Mr. Thompson a small wave, and headed down the hallway toward the practice room. The hallway was lined with framed photos from talent shows long forgotten, blurry snapshots of kids singing, dancing, holding homemade trophies. Jaden paused at one photo of a smiling girl about his age, playing violin on stage under bright lights. He wondered what it felt like to be chosen for something, to be celebrated. He pushed open the door to the practice room. It creaked loudly, as always. Inside sat the old upright piano, its surface scratched and scarred. In the corner was a worn-out music stand and a folding chair that wobbled if you leaned too far to the left. It wasn't much. But to Jaden, the room felt like the quietest place in the world. He laid his violin case on the table and hesitated before opening it. The cracked wood still hurt to look at, like staring at a bruise that refused to fade. He lifted the violin gently, holding it as if it might crumble. "Maybe music isn't made for people like me," he whispered to the empty room, words he hadn't meant to say, but had fallen out the night before. He closed his eyes and tried to breathe past the ache. Then the door clicked behind him. He spun around, startled. Elliot leaned against the doorway, snow melting on the shoulders of his coat. He held a paper cup of coffee in one hand, steam rising in slow curls. He looked out of place in the dimly lit room, but not uncomfortable, as if he'd been in rooms like this long before wealth ever touched his life. Jaden's breath caught. How did you find me?" "I looked," Elliot said, stepping inside. "Places like this are where I spent most of my time as a kid. Figured someone with your heart might gravitate toward the same kind of space." Jaden didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to adults showing up twice. Once was normal. Pity came cheap. Twice meant intention. And intention always made him wary. Elliot set the coffee on a nearby shelf and nodded at the violin. "You play here often?" "Yeah," Jaden said quietly. "We can't practice much in my building. Too loud. Thin walls." Elliot walked slowly around the room, observing the piano, the stand, the peeling paint. "I remember places like this," he murmured. "Drafty windows, broken keys. But sometimes the best music I ever heard came from spaces that looked like they should have been forgotten." Jaden stared at him. "You play?" "Used to." Elliot gave a faint smile. "Back when I still had more dreams than meetings." Jaden wasn't sure what that meant, but he felt something soften in his chest. Elliot pointed gently at the violin. "May I?" Jaden blinked. "You want to see it?" Elliot's voice warmed. "I want to understand what you're fighting for." Jaden handed it to him, embarrassed by the crack, the faded varnish, the makeshift tape that held the chin rest in place. But Elliot didn't flinch. He held the violin with reverence, turning it carefully, studying the fracture along the frame. Elliot stroked a thumb across the worn wood. "This violin's been loved," he said softly. "Even broken, it carries stories." The words hit Jaden harder than he expected. He sat down on the folding chair before his knees gave out. Elliot placed the violin gently on the table. "Jaden," he began, "yesterday at the bus stop, you helped that woman even though nobody else moved. Today you're here, practicing in a room most kids wouldn't give a second glance. That tells me something." Jaden swallowed. Tells you what? That you work, Elliot said. That you show up. That you care. And those are things money can't buy or fake. Jaden didn't know how to respond. He stared at the floor, heart thudding unevenly. Elliot's voice softened even further. Play something for me. Jaden froze. I don't know if I can. Why not? Jaden lifted his violin with trembling hands. It's broken, and I'm broken too, I guess. Elliot knelt beside him so they were eye level. No, he said quietly. Not broken. Bruised, maybe. But bruises heal. Silence hung thick for a moment. Then Jaden raised the violin to his chin. The bow felt clumsy in his grip. He played a short piece, nothing complicated, just a melody he used to hum while helping his mom cook dinner. His hands shook through every note. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good tonight. But it was honest. When he finished, his breath hitched. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know it sounded bad. Elliot shook his head. It sounded like truth. Jaden looked up, confused. Music that's too perfect doesn't move anyone, Elliot continued. But music that comes from a wounded place? That changes things. Jaden's throat tightened. The room felt smaller, warmer, heavier. Elliot stood, pulled out his phone, and stepped toward the door. I need to make a call, he said. There's something I need to arrange. Jaden blinked. Arrange? Elliot paused at the doorway. You're not going to disappear from this world, Jaden. Not on my watch. Then he stepped into the hallway, voice low as he spoke into the phone. Words Jaden couldn't make out, but felt were about him. Jaden stared at the violin in his lap, heart pounding. He didn't know what Elliot was planning. He didn't know why this man kept showing up. But for the first time in days, the room didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a beginning. Jaden sat there for a long moment after Elliot stepped out, the fading echo of his music still trembling in the air. Even with the violin cracked and his confidence cracked deeper, something about playing in front of Elliot had steadied him. The man saw him, not the brokenness, not the ragged edges, but the heart that kept beating underneath. Yet beginnings are fragile things. The next afternoon arrived gray and brittle, as Chicago winter days often did. The sky hung low, heavy with clouds, and the air smelled like snow waiting to fall. Jaden left school with his violin slung over his shoulder, planning to practice again at Jackson Park before heading home. He liked the open space there, the winding paths, the bare trees like dark veins against the sky, the way the lake wind hummed whenever he played. It gave him room to feel everything without walls closing in. He walked past the swings creaking in the wind, past a group of younger kids playing tag, their boots crunching over dead leaves. He found his usual bench near a patch of brittle winter grass, set the violin case down carefully, and took a deep breath. He lifted the instrument, letting the bow hover just above the strings, and then, "Hey, look who's back." Jaden flinched. 3 boys about his age, or maybe a year older, approached from behind the swings. He recognized them immediately. They were from a nearby block, kids who liked trouble the way some people liked music. He'd seen them around school before, shoving smaller kids in the hallway, laughing like rules didn't apply to them. The tallest one, wearing a bright red puffer jacket, smirked. "Yo, play us something, Mozart." Jaden tried to stay calm. He lowered his violin. "I'm just practicing. You can go somewhere else." The boy in the beanie stepped closer, too close. "We like it here." The third kid, chewing gum loudly, flicked a pebble at Jaden's shoe. "What you gonna do, cry on your little violin?" Jaden clenched his jaw. His heart thumped hard. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want to fight. He wanted to play. Just play. I'm not bothering anyone, he said quietly. Red Jacket snorted. You breathing is bothering us. A flash of heat rose in Jaden's chest, anger mixed with humiliation, the same burn he'd felt yesterday at the academy gates. But before he could step back or walk away, Beanie Boy lunged forward and snatched the violin bow right out of his hand. Hey! Jaden reached for it. Beanie twirled it between his fingers like a baton. Man, this thing's cheap. Looks like it came from a yard sale. Red Jacket laughed, grabbing the violin case. Think it'll break if I drop it? No, please. Jaden stumbled toward them, panic igniting behind his ribs. Give it back, now. The boys laughed harder. Red Jacket dangled the violin over the grass. Relax, dude. We're just... Whoa! His grip loosened for half a second. The violin slipped. Jaden lunged forward. Too late. It hit the frozen ground with a dull, cracking sound, a sound that sliced him open. Oops, Red Jacket said, shrugging. Guess it really was cheap. Jaden dropped to his knees. He lifted the violin with trembling hands. A new fracture ran deep along the bottom seam, splitting the wood like a wound. His breath vanished. He clutched it to his chest, the world narrowing to the broken curve in the lacquer. That was my dad's, he whispered. It came out thin, strangled. The boys went quiet for a beat. Then Gum Chewer smirked. Should have taken better care of it. Something inside Jaden buckled. He squeezed his eyes shut, unable to hold back the tears welling up. It wasn't just a violin breaking. It was everything. His father's last gift, his dream, his hope. The one piece of him that felt untouched by the world's cruelty, and now it lay cracked in his hands. Leave him alone! The voice came from behind them, low, sharp, controlled. The boys turned. Elliot stood near the bench, coat dusted with snowflakes, eyes burning with a fury Jaden had never seen. It wasn't loud or wild. It was cold, precise, the kind of anger that made even the wind seem to hesitate. Red Jacket lifted his chin. Who are you? Someone who's not impressed, Elliot said evenly. Now get out of here. Beanie scoffed. Why should we listen to you, old man? Elliot stepped forward, not aggressively, but with a confidence that shifted the entire atmosphere. Because bullies only look brave until someone actually looks at them. The boys exchanged glances. Gum Chewer muttered, Whatever, let's go. They walked off, tossing curses over their shoulders. Their laughter faded into the wind. Jaden stayed kneeling in the grass, holding the pieces of his violin together as if he could save it through sheer will. Elliot crouched beside him. Let me see. Jaden shook his head. It's done. It's over. Elliot didn't touch the violin. He didn't try to take it away. Instead, he lowered himself until they were eye level. Jaden, he said softly, look at me. Jaden hesitated. Then he looked up, his face streaked with quiet tears. You did nothing wrong, Elliot said. Every word was steady, firm. Someone took something from you. That's not your fault. Jaden swallowed hard. I can't fix it. I don't have the money. It's not about money, Elliot interrupted gently. It's about what this violin represents, and you're not losing that today. Jaden's breath stuttered. The weight of Elliot's assurance felt like a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. But how? Jaden whispered. Elliot stood and offered his hand. Come with me. There's something you need to hear. Jaden wiped his cheeks with his sleeve. He took Elliot's hand and slowly rose to his feet, still clutching the broken instrument. The winter wind pressed around them, crisp and sharp, but Jaden wasn't shaking from the cold anymore. He followed Elliot out of the park, the sound of the crack echoing faintly behind him like a ghost. But another sound waited ahead, one he didn't recognize yet. The sound of his life turning. Elliot didn't speak as they walked out of Jackson Park, boots crunching over patches of half-frozen grass. The sky above them had deepened into a soft, muted blue, the kind that happens just before the first evening stars appear. Cars hummed along the distant road, their headlights slicing through the early dusk. Jaden held his broken violin close, each step a mix of shame, exhaustion, and the aching tug of something unfamiliar: trust. They reached a small diner on the corner of 53rd, its neon sign flickering, open, in tired red letters. The place looked old, chrome trim dulled by years of winters, windows fogged from the warmth inside, but it glowed like a lantern in the cold. Elliot pulled the door open, and a bell above it chimed softly. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get warm." Inside, the diner smelled of coffee, pancakes, and something fried in butter. Booths lined the walls, each one covered in maroon vinyl stretched tight over worn cushions. A jukebox in the corner played a slow Motown tune, barely audible over the clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Elliot chose a booth in the back, quiet, tucked away, as if he wanted to shield Jaden from the world for a minute. Jaden slid in across from him, still holding the violin on his lap like a wounded animal. A waitress with kind eyes brought menus and 2 glasses of water. "You folks need a minute?" Elliot nodded. "Just coffee for me." And he glanced at Jaden. "Hot chocolate?" Jaden hesitated, then nodded. He couldn't remember the last time someone ordered for him without assuming what he'd like. The waitress smiled and walked away. Elliot leaned back slightly, studying the boy's face. His voice, when he spoke, was low and steady. "Tell me what you're feeling right now. Not what you think I want to hear. What you actually feel." Jaden stared at the wood grain of the table. "I feel stupid." "Why?" "Because I should have known better," Jaden whispered. "I should have walked away when I saw them coming." "That's not what makes you stupid." Jaden looked up sharply. "What they did was wrong," Elliot continued. "And you were just trying to live your life." Jaden swallowed. The hot chocolate arrived, steam rising, swirling upward like soft, ghostly ribbons. The waitress left without interrupting. Jaden wrapped his cold hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into his fingers. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy, like the air before a confession. "My violin was the last thing my dad gave me," Jaden said finally. His voice trembled just enough for the words to crack. "He saved for months to get it. Said I'd play on real stages someday. Said the world would hear me." He blinked rapidly. "Now it's trash." Elliot shook his head. "No, it's not trash. It's broken. There's a difference." Jaden looked up, confused. "Trash has no story," Elliot said softly. "This violin does. Your father's hands touched it. Yours shaped music through it. Pain doesn't erase meaning." Jaden's chest tightened. "Meaning doesn't fix it." "No," Elliot agreed. "But meaning is the reason we fix things." Jaden sat still, letting the words settle. Something about Elliot's voice felt like standing near a fire on a freezing night. Not warm enough to thaw everything, but enough to stop the shaking. Elliot sipped his coffee. "Yesterday, you said maybe music wasn't made for people like you." His eyes steadied on Jaden. "Who told you that?" Jaden stared down at his hot chocolate, watching a tiny bubble rise to the surface. "People, teachers, principals, kids. Sometimes it feels like the whole world." "And today's incident didn't help," Elliot said. "But I want you to hear me clearly. The world is not a single voice, and the ones who try to silence you," he tapped the table lightly, "they aren't the judges of your worth." Jaden's throat tightened again. "Then who is?" "You," Elliot said. "You're the only one who decides if you keep going." The diner felt warmer suddenly, more real. Jaden brushed a thumb along the violin's cracked seam. I don't know if I can keep going, he admitted. Not with this, not with how everything feels. Then don't keep going alone. Elliot reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a sleek silver card, and placed it on the table. But this one wasn't like the business cards he'd seen in movies. It was simple, Matt, with only a name and a phone number embossed in clean black letters. E. Mercer. A soft shiver ran through Jaden's hands. Why are you helping me? Elliot didn't hesitate. Because someone once helped me when I thought I was done, and because I don't want to watch another kid lose a dream the world already tries too hard to take. Jaden's breathing changed. Longer, slower, touched with fear and hope tangled together. Jaden, Elliot said, leaning forward, I want you to play again. Really play. But for that to happen, you need a violin that doesn't break in your hands. Jaden blinked. I can't afford a new one. I didn't ask if you could afford it, Elliot replied. I asked if you wanted to keep playing. Jaden stared at the man across from him, the stranger who kept showing up, who kept seeing things nobody else ever bothered to look for. The room around them faded until there was only the cracked violin between them, the quiet beat of his heart, and Elliot waiting for an answer. Finally, Jaden whispered, Yes. Elliot nodded once, almost solemnly, like he'd been waiting to hear that single word. Good, he said, because I already made a call, and tomorrow, someone wants to meet you. Jaden's brows pulled together. Meet me? Who? Elliot held his gaze, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. You'll find out, he said. But trust me, Jaden. This is the beginning of something bigger than you realize. Jaden lifted the broken violin again, fingers brushing the fracture. It wasn't fixed. His life wasn't fixed. Nothing had magically changed. But the weight of hopelessness had shifted, just enough to let one question drift into the silence between them. What if Elliot was right? He didn't know it yet. Not fully. Not deeply. But today wasn't an ending. It was the turning of the first page, and the story waiting for him would change everything. Jaden barely slept that night. The wind rattled the loose window in his bedroom. The radiator hissed unevenly, and downstairs someone's television played late-night reruns. Chicago breathed through the walls in a way that usually soothed him, but tonight nothing could quiet the thrum beneath his ribs. Someone wants to meet you. Elliot's words kept looping like a restless melody. He stared at the card on his nightstand. Simple. Silver. Elegant. E. Mercer. Just that. No company. No title. No tagline. The mystery of it made his stomach twist with curiosity and something dangerously close to fear. Important people always had more printed on their cards than their own names. He wondered what kind of man carried a card like that. But morning arrived whether he was ready or not. The next day was bitterly cold, wind slicing through the south side like invisible glass. Jaden bundled himself in 2 hoodies beneath his winter coat and tucked the broken violin case under his arm. It felt wrong to leave it behind, even though he couldn't play it now, like abandoning a part of himself. He met Elliot near the bus stop on 63rd, where they'd first spoken. The man stood with his hands in his pockets, watching the street with a calmness Jaden couldn't imagine having at any age. You ready? Elliot asked. Jaden nodded, though he wasn't sure he was ready for anything at all. They took the train instead of the bus, the clatter of wheels on tracks echoing through the car as they traveled north toward downtown. Jaden watched the neighborhoods change outside the window, the older brick flats giving way to newer condos, corner stores replaced by coffee shops with chalkboard menus, graffiti fading into polished glass. When they exited onto Michigan Avenue, the city felt different, colder, taller, louder in all the ways that overwhelmed him. Elliot moved like he'd walked these streets his whole life, weaving through crowds effortlessly. Jaden followed, gripping his violin case like a lifeline. Eventually, they stopped in front of a building that didn't look real. It rose at least 40 floors into the sky, all sleek steel and mirrored windows reflecting the pale winter sun. A valet opened the glass doors as they approached, and warm air drifted out like a luxurious sigh. Jaden froze. This place is too fancy for me. Elliot glanced down at him. It's just a building, Jaden. Yeah, but it's not a building people like me walk into. That's because people like you have been told that lie too many times. Elliot placed a gentle but firm hand on his shoulder. Walk with me. Jaden swallowed hard and stepped inside. The lobby gleamed with marble floors and modern art sculptures. A chandelier hung above them like a floating galaxy of lights. Jaden tried not to stare, but it was impossible. Everything here felt like a world built out of quiet money, old money, the kind that carried its own gravity. A receptionist smiled at Elliot. Good morning, Mr. Mercer. Your conference room is ready. Mr. Mercer. Jaden's breath caught. He felt the ground shift beneath him, not literally, but in a way that made his ears ring. He looked up at Elliot, suddenly seeing him in a completely new frame. The calm voice, the sharp eyes, the silver card. Mercer? Jaden echoed softly. As in, yes, Elliot said, not slowing his pace. As in that Mercer. Jaden nearly dropped his violin. But you're a billionaire. So they tell me, Elliot replied with a shrug that seemed too casual for someone with skyscrapers bearing their family name. I prefer someone who works too much. Jaden blinked rapidly, his mind scrambling to catch up. The Mercer Foundation funded scholarships across the country. They'd been in magazines, news segments, charity galas. Elliot Mercer's face had been on Forbes, twice, and that man had sat across from him in a diner. That man had walked him here. That man had asked him to play music on a cracked violin. Suddenly, the world felt tilted. They reached a private elevator. When the doors closed, sealing them in velvet silence, Jaden found his voice again. Why me? He whispered. Elliot looked down, a hint of something old flickering behind his eyes. Pain, maybe, or memory. Because you remind me of someone I used to be. Jaden didn't ask more. Some truths were meant to unfold slowly. The elevator chimed. They stepped into a conference room overlooking the frozen lake, an endless stretch of gray-blue that seemed to reach the horizon. The long mahogany table gleamed beneath lights shaped like glass waves. A woman in her early 50s stood near the window, her posture elegant, her hair swept into a neat bun. She held a leather portfolio and turned as they entered. Jaden, Elliot said, this is Dr. Lila Vaughn. She's the head of strings at the Chicago Youth Conservatory. Jaden's pulse quickened. The conservatory was legendary. Dr. Vaughn stepped forward with a warm smile. I've heard quite a lot about you. Jaden's mouth went dry. About me? Yes, she said. Elliot told me you have a gift. Jaden shot Elliot a startled look. You said that about me? I did, Elliot replied simply. And I meant it. Dr. Vaughn gestured toward a chair. May I hear you play something? Anything at all? Jaden froze. His fingers tightened on the violin case. I can't. My violin is broken. Elliot nodded at her. Dr. Vaughn crossed the room and opened a rectangular black case resting on the table. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a violin so beautiful Jaden forgot how to breathe. Its rich, honey-colored wood glowed under the room's lighting, every surface polished, every curve perfect. "This," she said gently, "is yours for today." Jaden stared at it like it was a dream he wasn't allowed to touch. I can't use that," he stammered. I don't deserve." Dr. Vaughn shook her head. "Worth has nothing to do with deserving. Music chooses its players, and Elliot believes music has chosen you." Jaden's throat tightened. He lifted trembling hands toward the violin, stopping just inches above it, afraid he might leave fingerprints on something too perfect. Elliot stepped beside him. "Jaden," he said softly, "play." Jaden picked up the instrument. It felt impossibly light in his hands, like holding breath, or hope, or something just on the edge of becoming real. He lowered the bow to the strings, and then he played. Not confidently, not smoothly, but honestly, every note carrying the weight of rejection, the tremor of humiliation, the warmth of kindness, the break of loss, and the spark of something new. The room stayed silent except for him. Dr. Vaughn listened with her eyes half closed. Elliot watched with that same fierce, quiet pride he had shown at the park. When Jaden finished, the last note shivered into the air. Vaughn exhaled. "You have soul," she murmured. "Technique can be taught. Heart cannot." Jaden lowered the violin slowly. He couldn't speak. He didn't trust his voice. "Jaden," she continued, "I would like to offer you a spot at the conservatory's winter mentorship program." Jaden's breath hitched. "You want me?" "Oh, I don't just want you," Dr. Vaughn said with a smile. "I need students like you." Jaden stared at her, overwhelmed, shaking from a storm of emotion. And then Elliot placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "This," he whispered, "is the beginning I promised you." Jaden closed his eyes. He had been rejected because of his skin. But here, today, someone had listened because of his soul. And the world felt just a little bit more possible. Jaden held the borrowed violin with both hands as he stepped out of the conservatory building beside Elliot. The winter sun cut across the city like a blade of pale gold, glinting off frozen sidewalks and car roofs. His breath clouded the air, but inside his chest something burned warm and trembling. He wasn't dreaming. Someone had chosen him. Not because of pity, not because of pressure, but because when he played, something true had come out. Yet as the two of them walked toward the train station, the warmth in Jaden's chest wavered. A shadow crawled back into his mind. Northbridge Arts Academy, with its marble floors and polished rejection. The memory of the judge's cold eyes tugged at him like a string pulled too tight. Elliot noticed. "You're quiet," he said. Jaden shrugged. "I'm just thinking." "About the conservatory?" "About the academy," Jaden murmured. "They threw me out like I was nothing." Elliot stopped walking. The wind pressed past them, but Jaden could feel the man's gaze sharpen, turning inward as though something heavy and familiar stirred in him. "Jaden," Elliot said, "what happened to you there was wrong, and you don't have to go back." Jaden nodded slowly, but a seed of anger sparked somewhere deep. Not wild anger, not loud, just a steady, rising heat. "I want to," he whispered. Elliot's brows lifted. "Why?" Jaden looked at his cracked violin case, tucked under his arm like a fallen soldier. "Because they told me I wasn't good enough. Because they didn't even listen. And because nobody should get to treat people like that." Elliot stared at him, truly stared, as if the boy had surprised him. Then he nodded once. "All right. Then we'll go back." "We?" Jaden asked. "Oh, you're not facing them alone," Elliot said, turning toward the station again. "Not after what they did." The next morning, Chicago woke under a blanket of new snow. Trees shimmered white against the gray sky, and buses left trails of slush along the streets. Elliot picked Jaden up in a sleek black sedan, not flashy, but unmistakably expensive. A driver sat behind the wheel, greeting Jaden with a friendly nod. Jaden sat stiffly in the back seat, violin case on his lap, as the car cut through downtown and headed north toward the academy. He rubbed his palms against his coat, trying to calm his heartbeat. He didn't know what would happen when they arrived. Didn't know what Elliot planned. Didn't know if he even wanted to know. But Elliot sat beside him, calm as quiet thunder. "They're going to see you today," Elliot said. "The real you, not the version they made up in their heads." Jaden nodded, though his throat felt tight. When the car pulled up to Northbridge Arts Academy, snowflakes drifted through the air like ash from a slow-burning fire. The tall, gilded gates glinted in the cold. Parents in long coats breezed past, clutching the hands of their perfectly groomed children. Jaden hesitated. Everything about this place felt designed to remind him he didn't belong. Elliot placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Let's go." They stepped through the gates. The lobby was just as Jaden remembered. Marble floors, gold railings, students rushing through hallways in clean uniforms. He felt eyes on him immediately. A parent whispered behind a gloved hand. A boy with gelled hair stared at his old violin case and snickered. Jaden swallowed. Elliot noticed every look, every whisper, but he didn't react. He walked with the steady confidence of someone who knew. The entire building stood on money he could pull from beneath it if he chose. The receptionist glanced up, ready to dismiss them, until she saw Elliot. "Mr. Mercer?" she stammered, nearly standing. "We didn't know you were coming today." "You weren't supposed to," Elliot said. Calm, controlled, dangerous. I can call the director." "You will," Elliot replied. "Now." The woman scrambled for the phone. Jaden tried not to stare, but he couldn't help it. The last time he'd stood in this lobby, he'd felt like a stain on the floor. Today, he wasn't sure who he was, only that he wasn't the same boy who'd walked out crying. Moments later, the director hurried down the stairs, a man in a tailored suit with silver cufflinks and a smile too tight at the corners. "Mr. Mercer," he said breathlessly. "What an unexpected honor. If we had known—" "You didn't," Elliot said. "But now that I'm here, we need a room." The director blinked. "A room?" Elliot gestured to Jaden. "He has something to show you." The director's gaze shifted to Jaden, and in an instant, the same look from the audition room flashed across his face. Doubt tinted with something uglier. Jaden felt his stomach clench. "I'm not sure we have space available without an appointment." "You do now," Elliot replied, stepping forward just enough for the director to step back. "You rejected this young man without hearing him. Today, you will listen." Parents nearby stopped pretending not to watch. The director cleared his throat. "Mr. Mercer, our admissions process—" "Spare me," Elliot cut in, his voice quiet but cutting. "If your process filters talent based on bias instead of skill, then we're not talking about process. We're talking about failure." A murmur spread through the lobby. Someone gasped softly. A mother tightened her grip on her daughter's hand. The director swallowed. "Of course, follow me." He led them down a long hallway to the same audition room where Jaden had been dismissed days earlier. The lights hummed overhead. The air smelled faintly of floor polish and old paper. Jaden's hands shook as he opened the violin case. The crack in the wood stared back at him like an old wound. But Elliot placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Not that one," he said. From under his coat, Elliot lifted a familiar black case, the same one Dr. Vaughn had given him at the conservatory. He opened it, revealing the beautiful violin resting inside like a promise. Jaden's breath caught. "For today," Elliot whispered. for them to see who you really are. Jaden lifted the violin. Its weight felt like destiny. He stepped forward. Parents lined the back wall. Teachers peeked through the door. Even the students grew quiet, sensing something unusual. The director folded his arms, forcing a smile. "Whenever you're ready." Jaden raised the bow. His heart hammered. His lungs tightened. But when the first note left the strings, warm, clear, honest, the room froze. He didn't play perfectly. He played truth. He played the cold street where they rejected him. He played the cracked violin that carried his father's love. He played the kindness he offered strangers. He played the sound of something breaking and something healing. When he finished, the silence was a different kind now. Not dismissive, not condescending, but stunned. The director's mouth opened, no sound came. A parent whispered, "My God," and Elliot stepped beside Jaden, resting a steady hand on his shoulder. "This," Elliot said, eyes fixed on the director, "is the boy you judged without listening." No one in the room dared to breathe. Jaden stood trembling, but taller than before, and for the first time in his life, the academy wasn't looking down at him. They were looking up. Jaden's bow hand slowly lowered, trembling from the last vibrating note. Every breath in the room felt suspended, as if even the walls needed a moment to absorb what had just happened. Snow tapped softly against the high windows, but inside the silence was thick, strangely reverent. No one spoke. Not the director, not the parents, not the students who had once whispered when he passed. Jaden stood there, chest rising and falling, wondering if this was what it felt like to finally be heard. Then Elliot stepped forward. "Before anyone says a word," he said quietly, "understand this. What you heard today is not an exception. It's what talent sounds like when it's not buried under bias." The director's jaw tightened. The teachers exchanged uneasy glances. A few parents looked offended that someone dared to speak the truth aloud in a place so used to letting it hide behind polished doors. One father muttered, "This is inappropriate." A mother whispered, "He's making a scene." Elliot turned, not angry, but precise. "A scene?" he repeated. This boy was turned away at the door because of the color of his skin. The scene already happened. I'm here to correct it. The words struck the air with a quiet authority that made even the disapproving parents shrink back. The director attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Mercer, we simply followed protocol. Our audition standards are—" "Don't insult both of us," Elliot cut in. "You handed him a 3-minute dismissal. You didn't evaluate him. You eliminated him." The director's face flushed. "Northbridge is a selective institution. We reserve the right to—" "To what? Hide discrimination behind policy?" Elliot asked. Gasps rippled through the room. A teacher who had remained silent until now spoke up softly. "He's right. We've seen it. We've all felt it. Not everyone gets the same chance here." The director shot her a warning look, but she didn't lower her gaze. Jaden felt his heart knock against his ribs. Someone was standing up for him. Someone other than Elliot. Someone inside these walls. Elliot nodded to her respectfully. Then he turned back to the director. "So here is what's going to happen," Elliot said, voice steady as a tightened string. "You will offer Jaden Cole full admission, with a full scholarship, not as charity, not as optics, but as acknowledgement of the mistake you made." The director opened his mouth, but Elliot raised a hand. "And if you choose not to—" He stepped closer, lowering his voice, though everyone heard it. "I will withdraw every cent of my foundation's funding from Northbridge Arts Academy, effective immediately." Whispers erupted. Panic flashed through several parents' eyes. Someone said, He can't be serious. But the tremor in their voice revealed they knew he was. Jaden's breath caught. He had known Elliot was powerful, but not like this. Not the kind of power that made a whole institution lean back on its heels. The director stammered, "Miss Mercer, that would devastate our programming, our outreach, our competitions." "You should have thought about that," Elliot said softly, "before you devastated a child." Every word landed with the force of a gavel. A parent stood. "My son worked for years to get in here. You cannot disrupt the entire school for fairness?" Elliot asked. "For the truth? For giving a talented, hard-working boy the same chance your son received just by showing up?" The room went still again. Jaden stood frozen, violin hanging at his side. He didn't know how to breathe properly, didn't know what expression to hold. All he knew was that something irreversible was happening. Because of him, because of his music, because of the man who refused to let the world stay the same. The director wiped his brow. We will need to review this with the board." "No," Elliot replied. "You'll decide now." Teachers murmured. Parents shifted nervously. Students peered from behind the doorway, sensing history in the making. Finally, the director exhaled and straightened his jacket. "Fine," he said. "We will offer Mr. Cole admission. Full scholarship, effective immediately." A wave of sound burst through the hallway. Some clapped quietly, some glared. Most were stunned. Jaden felt the world tilt beneath him. He whispered, "Elliot, you didn't have to do all that." Elliot crouched slightly so their eyes met, speaking just for him. "Yes," he said, "I did." Before Jaden could reply, the director cleared his throat. "We have an event next week. Open Talent Evening. If Mr. Cole is to join us, he will perform." A challenge disguised as an invitation. Elliot didn't flinch. "He'll be there." Jaden swallowed hard. "I will?" Elliot smiled. "You will." Because this wasn't just a door opening. It was a door the world once tried to slam shut, now forced wide by truth, talent, and the determined hands of a boy who refused to disappear. As they left the room, whispers trailed behind them. Questions, doubts, envy, admiration, but Jaden barely heard them. He held the violin close to his chest, feeling the faint hum of possibility inside it. Snow flurried through the courtyard as they stepped outside, settling on Jaden's shoulders like a soft, cold reminder that winter wasn't over. But something in him had shifted. Some frost inside had cracked. And the moment he took a breath of the icy air, he realized he hadn't just earned a spot. He had earned back his voice. Next week, he'd step on a stage as someone the Academy couldn't ignore, and he would play not to prove them wrong, but to prove that he belonged everywhere they tried to keep him out. The days leading up to Open Talent Evening felt both impossibly long and terrifyingly short. Chicago wore a gray winter coat that week, heavy clouds sinking low over the skyline, streetlights glowing like tired lanterns in the cold. Yet inside Jaden, something burned warm, steady, nervous, but alive. Every afternoon after school, he practiced at the small community center near his apartment. The room had old carpet, flickering fluorescent lights, and an upright piano missing 2 keys. But it also had something the Academy never gave him: silence that didn't judge, space that didn't shrink around him, walls that didn't make him feel like an intruder. Each note of his new composition, Southside Sunrise, rose from memories he rarely spoke of: mornings waking up to sirens, his mom packing lunches at 4 a.m., his dad humming old jazz melodies while fixing broken appliances in their living room. It was a song born from the thin line between survival and hope. A song that wanted to rise, even when life held it down. Elliot visited twice that week, always quietly, never interrupting. "You write like someone who's lived more than 15 years, he said once. Jaden shrugged. "Sometimes life makes you older before you're ready." Elliot didn't argue. He only nodded, a shadow passing behind his eyes, like he knew that truth all too well. The night of the event arrived with a thin mist of snow drifting over downtown Chicago. The small historic theater had old brass railings, red velvet seats, and a marquee flickering with the words, "Northbridge Open Talent Evening." Student showcase parents hustled in wearing wool coats and scarves, carrying warm cups of coffee that steamed against the cold. Students hurried backstage with instruments, shaking out their nerves. Jaden stood among them, hugging his violin case close. But unlike the others, he'd never performed on a stage like this. Never under lights. Never for a crowd that included the very people who first told him he wasn't enough. His fingers chilled despite the heater blowing from the corner. "Deep breath," Elliot said, appearing behind him. "You're ready." Jaden swallowed. "I feel like my stomach's trying to escape." "That's how you know you care," Elliot said. "Let it sharpen you, not scare you." The stage manager called his name. Not yet to perform, just to line up behind the curtain. But even hearing it aloud made something flutter in his ribcage. His name. "Here." Announced in a place that once wouldn't allow him past the lobby. Inside the auditorium, the house lights dimmed. Conversations lowered into a hush. Snowflakes outside tapped gently against the windows like distant applause. A violinist from an upper grade played first, her technique flawless, her tone clean but distant. Then a pianist. Then a flute duet. Each one received polite applause, the kind people gave when they appreciated the effort, but not the soul. Then the host walked to the mic. "Our next performer is a new student at Northbridge Arts Academy. He will be performing an original work, South Side Sunrise. Please welcome Jaden Cole." For a split second, Jaden thought he hadn't heard correctly. The name didn't feel like it belonged to him. It sounded like someone else. Someone braver, someone sure. But it was his name. He stepped onto the stage. The lights felt blinding at first, warm on his face, making the audience disappear into soft, shadowed shapes. His heartbeat echoed in his ears, almost louder than the applause fading into silence. From the front row, he spotted Elliot. Still, steady, a quiet anchor. Jaden also saw his mother, hands clasped tightly, eyes shimmering with belief she had carried alone for too many years. He lifted his violin. The world held its breath. He drew the bow. The first note was soft, almost hesitant, a pale streak of light searching through darkness. It trembled with memory. The sound of waking up early to avoid trouble on his block. The echo of police cars on cold mornings. The whisper of his father's voice telling him, "Keep your head high, little man." Then the melody grew. The bow glided with purpose, gathering warmth, weaving in and out of shadows. Jaden didn't just play music, he told a story. The story of the South Side rising with the sun, despite everything pressing it down. His fingers moved like they had been waiting their entire lives for this moment. Halfway through, he closed his eyes. Not to block out the room, but to let in the parts of himself he'd never dared show to strangers. Every scrape of the bow was a confession. Every swell was a promise. Every note was a truth long denied space to breathe. When he finished, the final note hung in the air, fragile but determined, like a bird learning to fly. Silence followed. Not cold silence, not rejecting silence, but a silence so full it felt like the theater itself was listening. Then, from somewhere in the back, a single clap, then another, and another, until the entire auditorium rose to its feet. A standing ovation. Jaden stood frozen as if anchored to the wood beneath him. His chest tightened. His throat stung. The applause roared like a wave crashing over years of doubt, years of carrying the world on a thin young back. He bowed. When he looked up again, Elliot stepped forward, walking toward the stage steps. No expression on his face except something firm, decided. The audience quieted as he reached the mic. "I want to make an announcement," Elliot said. "What you witnessed tonight wasn't just talent. It was truth. And truth like this deserves not just applause, but opportunity." The audience leaned forward. "This evening," Elliot continued, "I am formally establishing the Black Youth Music Access Fund, supporting 200 students across this country with the training, resources, and stages they deserve." Gasps spread through the room. Jaden's vision blurred. "And this young man," Elliot said, turning toward him, "will be the first face of it." Jaden felt his knees weaken. The bow slipped slightly in his hand. The theater erupted into applause again, louder, brighter, filled with something he had waited his whole life to feel. Not pity, not doubt, not suspicion, respect. He clutched his violin, holding it close as though holding his father's hand. For the first time, the applause didn't feel like sound. It felt like a door swinging open. And this time, he was the one stepping through it. The roar of applause still trembled faintly in Jaden's chest as he stepped backstage, violin in hand, breath uneven from the rush of it all. Behind him, the muffled sounds of the next performer warming up drifted into the air, but they felt distant, almost unreal. The hall, the crowd, the lights, they had all blurred together into one unforgettable moment. His mother rushed to him first. Her coat still smelled faintly of laundry soap and the long hours she worked, but tonight her arms felt like the safest place in the world. "Baby," she whispered, holding his cheeks as if she needed to confirm he was real. "Your daddy would have been so proud, so proud." Jaden swallowed the welling heat behind his eyes. He hadn't allowed himself to think of his father on that stage, afraid it might break him. But hearing it now felt like someone striking a match inside his heart. Before he could respond, Elliot approached with his slow, deliberate stride. The crowd behind him parted as though instinctively aware they were making room for someone who never needed to announce himself. "You didn't just play music tonight," Elliot said when he reached Jaden. "You played testimony." Jaden blinked. "I was just trying to do it right." "You did more than right," Elliot replied softly. "You shifted a room." A room, Jaden thought, that once chose to reject him. He wasn't sure if he should smile or cry or laugh. Instead, he just looked down at his violin. The old case worn, the edges scratched, the handle frayed from years of his father's hands. Somehow it looked smaller tonight, lighter, because he wasn't carrying it alone anymore. After the showcases ended, the small theater lobby became a mixture of warm air, winter coats, and excited conversations. Students emerged from backstage to find their families, and for the first time, several parents approached Jaden, not with hesitation, but with curiosity. "Your composition, it was stunning. My daughter said she wants to learn from you. You belong here, young man. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Jaden nodded, grateful but slightly overwhelmed. He wasn't used to this much attention directed at him without suspicion hiding underneath it. It felt strange. It felt good. But above all, it felt new. Elliot remained politely at the edge of conversations, distant enough for Jaden to stand on his own, close enough that Jaden could feel the anchor of his presence whenever he looked over. Eventually, Elliot stepped closer and spoke quietly. "Let's take a walk." Jaden followed him out into the frosty night. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the streetlights, collecting on the cracked sidewalks and parked cars along Dearborn Street. Chicago felt different this evening. Not cold, not weary, but expectant. like a city holding its breath at the edge of something meaningful. They walked a few blocks before Elliot stopped beneath the glow of a corner lamp. Cars hummed past. The air carried the soft bite of winter. "Jaden," Elliot said, "I meant what I announced in there. Not because I wanted to make a spectacle, but because change needs roots. And it needs faces. Your face, your story." "I don't know if I'm ready for all that," Jaden murmured. "No one ever is," Elliot replied gently. "But your music makes people listen. And when people listen, they begin to care. That's how change starts." Jaden dug the toe of his shoe into the snow. "Why me?" Elliot looked up briefly at the heavy sky, then back at him. His answer came low and thoughtful. "Because once, a long time ago, I was you, and no one listened when I spoke. I swore to myself that if I ever had the chance to change that, for even one kid, I'd take it." Jaden stared, stunned. He had always imagined Elliot as a man born into steel-gray suits and sharp confidence, the kind of man who owned rooms simply by breathing inside them. It never occurred to him that Elliot might have once stood outside locked doors with no key of his own. Elliot turned slightly, watching a train rumble in the distance over the elevated rails. "The fund we're launching," he continued, "isn't about charity. It's about access. Access you deserved from the beginning. Access 200 other kids deserve too." Jaden felt the world tilt again, not with fear this time, but with possibility. Wide, rising possibility. The snow crackled under their shoes as they resumed walking. "Tomorrow," Elliot said, "there's something else I want to show you." "What is it?" "You'll see. Consider it the beginning of your next chapter." Jaden smiled faintly. "Feels like I'm still trying to understand the last one." "That's the beauty of it," Elliot said. "These chapters overlap." The next day dawned cold but bright. Jaden and his mother waited outside their apartment complex when a black SUV rolled up. Elliot stepped out, not with the entourage Jaden expected, not with assistants or reporters, but alone. He greeted Jaden's mother with respectful warmth, then nodded toward the vehicle. "Ready?" Jaden climbed in, violin case resting across his lap. The city rolled past them. Graffiti walls, shuttered storefronts, rows of brick houses, the same worn sidewalks he'd walked thousands of times. But this time, he wasn't on foot. This time, he moved through the city at the pace of someone finally being carried forward instead of held back. They drove south. Jaden's mother grew quiet, her hands clasped tight. "Elliot," she said softly, "where exactly are we going?" "To a place that belonged to you once," Elliot replied, "and should belong to you again." Jaden frowned, confused, but when the SUV slowed, when it turned into a small courtyard beneath an aging apartment building with faded yellow bricks and rusted fire escapes, Jaden felt his breath stop. He knew this place. Even years later, he knew it. The building where he took his first steps, where he played catch in the hallway with his father, where the eviction notice arrived the week after the funeral, where they lost everything, his childhood home. "Why are we here?" Jaden whispered, voice barely audible. Elliot stepped onto the curb and gestured toward the second-floor unit with the chipped green door. "Because it's yours," he said simply. Jaden blinked. "What?" "I bought it back," Elliot said. "Signed the papers yesterday afternoon. And it's yours again, the home you lost. It's waiting for you." Jaden felt the world blur. His chest tightened so sharply he had to inhale in small, jagged breaths. His mother covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming silently. "Elliot," she whispered, "you didn't have to." "I did," he said. "Because no child should lose their home and their hope in the same year. Because your son deserves a foundation that won't crack under him. And because your husband would have wanted him to have a place he could grow from, not run from. Jaden's knees nearly buckled. He clutched his violin tighter, not to protect it, but because he needed something solid to hold on to as the ground shifted beneath him. Elliot stepped closer, speaking gently, almost fatherly. They rejected you because of your skin, he said. I listened because of your soul. Jaden didn't know whether to break down or stand tall, so he did both. He cried into his mother's shoulder. Then he straightened and breathed, and let the weight of the moment settle into him like warmth after a long winter. It wasn't a gift. It was restoration. A lost chapter returned. A foundation rebuilt. A beginning again. As they climbed the steps toward the green door, Jaden glanced back at Elliot. Snow drifted around him like falling light. Why me? Jaden asked again, but softer this time. Elliot smiled. Because some doors open only when the right knock comes. And last week, Jaden, you knocked. Inside, the apartment waited, empty, quiet, full of echoes of who they were and who they could become again. And for the first time, Jaden felt not like a boy surviving the world, but a young man ready to step into it. A home reclaimed, a future rewritten, a soul finally heard. Tomorrow he would return to the academy. Tomorrow he would start learning as someone they had once tried to keep out. But tonight, he walked through a door once taken from him. Tonight, he walked into belonging. The moment the green door swung open, a breath of warm, familiar air washed over Jaden, though the apartment was empty, untouched, and silent. It smelled faintly of pine, of old radiators warming slowly, and of something that lived deeper. Memory. His mother stepped in first, her hand trembling as she touched the wall beside the entryway. For years she had avoided driving past this block, too painful to look at what used to be theirs. Now she stood inside again, her shoulders folding into soft, disbelieving shivers. This place, she whispered. It feels like time stopped for us. Jaden drifted into the living room where the thin winter sunlight spilled across the faded wooden floorboards. He saw his father's old recliner in his mind, the spot where he used to sit with a toothpick in his mouth, humming blues rhythms while fixing busted headphones or rewiring lamps. He saw the little corner where he once practiced violin on milk crates stacked 3 high so the mirror reached his face. He saw laughter, struggle, love, all lingering like warm fingerprints in the air. He swallowed hard. It feels like coming home. Elliot remained near the doorway, hands in his coat pockets, watching with a quiet reverence, as if he knew he had stepped into someone else's sacred ground. He didn't speak, didn't intrude, didn't perform the moment. He simply allowed it to live. Jaden's mother turned toward him, eyes full, voice unsteady. Why would you do this? For us? Elliot stepped farther inside, the old floor creaking under his shoes. Because stability is not luxury. It's foundation. And every child, especially a child carrying the kind of fire your son carries, needs foundation. Jaden turned away, blinking fast. His throat tightened again. But these weren't the tears he knew from rejection or frustration. These were gentler, heavier in a different way. His mother clasped her hands over her mouth. Thank you, she said, barely audible. You don't owe me thanks, Elliot replied. Just let this be a place where he can grow without fear. Jaden stepped into his old room, smaller than he remembered. The window cracked slightly from years of shifting seasons. He ran his fingertips across the chipped paint on the sill. He could almost hear his younger self practicing until his wrist cramped, trying to imitate melodies he heard on the radio. He stood there, still as a held breath, until his mother joined him. It feels right, she said softly. Jaden nodded. Yeah, it really does. They spent the next hour walking through the rooms, opening cabinets, recalling memories. Elliot stayed respectfully in the background, offering space but never leaving. It felt like he knew the home wasn't his to rediscover, only to return. When the tour ended, they gathered in the living room. Sunlight had shifted to a golden wash across the floor. "Jaden," Elliot said, "I want you to understand something." Jaden turned toward him. "You have talent, tremendous talent, but talent alone doesn't change the world. Courage does, kindness does, integrity does. You carry all three. That's why I listened to you outside the academy gate. Your music didn't reach me first. Your heart did." Jaden dropped his gaze. Compliments always sat awkwardly on his shoulders, like coats a size too big. Elliot smiled gently. "Own it. You earned it." His mother squeezed his shoulder. Then Elliot reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. "This isn't a gift," he said. "It's an invitation." Jaden raised an eyebrow. "To what?" "Your future. Open it." Inside lay a printed sheet with a header from the Illinois Youth Orchestra, one of the most respected programs in the Midwest. At the bottom, a sentence glowing like a sunrise. "We are pleased to offer Jaden Cole a full annual scholarship and solo feature for next season." Jaden lifted his eyes, stunned. "Is this real?" Elliot nodded. "They received a recording of your performance last night." "I didn't record anything," Jaden said. "I did," Elliot replied. "Only for this reason. I wanted them to hear what the world would miss if they didn't make room for you." Jaden's heart hammered so hard he felt dizzy. He had spent so many days à soir paying feeling invisible, so many nights practicing alone, hoping someone, anyone, would care. And now here he was, standing barefoot in the living room of the home he'd lost, holding a letter telling him the world finally saw him. He wasn't invisible anymore. His mother wrapped her arms around him from behind, whispering through tears, "This is your beginning, baby." Elliot stepped closer. "And remember, this isn't happening to you. It's happening because of you. Because you helped a stranger with groceries. Because you played through fear. Because you spoke your truth in the cold air of a Chicago winter." He paused, voice deepening. "You changed me too." Jaden didn't fully understand what that meant, not yet, but he felt the sincerity behind it. As evening crept across the city, they stood together in the quiet home, sharing a silence that felt heavy but warm. Eventually, Elliot made his way toward the front door. He rested his hand on the frame, turning back one last time. "Use this place," he told Jaden. "Fill it with music, fill it with life, and when you feel ready, fill it with people you lift up the way someone lifted you." Jaden nodded. "I will." "I know," Elliot said. Then he left, disappearing down the stairwell, with the soft echo of footsteps fading into the hum of the South Side night. Later, after unpacking a few boxes from storage, Jaden wandered out to the old back alley behind the building. The streetlight flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the snow-dusted pavement. The same alley where he once played melodies for stray cats, where his father taught him the difference between playing notes and playing truth. A small boy stood there now, one Jaden recognized from the building next door, watching him shyly. "You're the violin kid, right?" the boy asked. Jaden smiled a little. "I guess I am." The boy's hands were buried in his thin jacket. "Do you think you could teach me someday?" Jaden knelt, the snow crunching softly beneath him. "Yeah," he said. "I think I can." He pulled out his violin, not the old cracked one, but the new one Elliot had given him, and played a slow, warm melody that rose into the cold air like breath. Soft, gentle, hopeful. The boy listened with wide, unblinking eyes, and somewhere above them, a window opened, another kid peeking out, then another from across the courtyard. One by one, the alley filled with small, silent witnesses drawn by the sound. Jaden played for them, for the past, for the future, for the home reclaimed, for the soul finally heard. He played because he had been lifted, and now knew how to lift. When the final note faded, drifting into the night like a wish, the children clapped softly, their small voices echoing between brick walls. Jaden bowed slightly. "Music belongs to all of us," he said. And in that simple moment, the South Side didn't feel forgotten. It didn't feel overlooked. It felt alive. It felt possible. It felt like a community beginning to rise. Just like him. Just like the sun in his composition. A sunrise that finally had space to shine. If this story touched you in any way, drop a simple comment below. Even a 0 or 1 is enough to let us know you're here, listening and rooting for more stories like Jaden's. And if you want to follow along with the next journey, the next rise, the next moment someone finds their voice, make sure to subscribe. Your support helps these stories keep shining.